Good morning, TSU Tigers. I hope that you are ready. We are packing our bags and heading to Africa, specifically Zambia. We are about to have an awesome live panel by our Fulbright scholar, Roberta Muchangwe, discussing the impact of COVID-19 on journalism practices in Africa. I would like to welcome our presenter, Roberta Muchangwe, Yamiko, Tapela, Fatima, Petronella, Victor, Bibiana, Mutinta, Thomas, and Christopher. Welcome to the campus of Texas Southern University virtually. We are so excited to have you, and we are looking forward to your panel.
Thank you so much for having us. We are really excited to be here. And my team is super excited to finally interact with Texas Southern University.
So now my question is, do we bring the concerns up? Do we just keep quiet and keep making a noise?
When you bring up the other concerns you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how come
The other concerns is bringing up the mail.
All right, so I'm guessing we should get into it already. I don't know if we have a moderator present with us right now.
Yes, we do. You're the moderator, Roberta.
Okay, so like the person who introduced us indicated, I spent some time with Texas Southern University back in 2020 and 2019. And I left during a time when the COVID had just begun. To be specific, I left on May 18, 2020. And trust me, it was the most scary journey ever. I figured I could postpone it, but then again, I wasn't so sure about what would happen. And to be honest, it was just a very uncertain time, a time full of uncertainties. Otherwise, I made it home safe. And when I got back home, I of course had to get to work. Think about it. After working, I had to get back to work. So these are some of my students and one friend, Bibiana Lambart, who's a journalist with the Radio Christian Voice, who decided to, join us because she is really interested in anything that affects journalists. So these people you see today are some of the students that greatly missed me when I was away, and I missed them too. And of course, most of them were recently on industrial attachments, which I think you might want to refer to as internships. So they were practicing their journalism during the COVID. So I figured, why not get them in, to share their experiences as regards what's on the ground here in Africa. So for starters, perhaps I should be able to also share with you exactly how COVID has impacted our country as a whole. It has pretty much affected us the same way that it has affected the whole globe, if anything, but then of course the extents might be different. Yeah. So as it stands in my country right now, the total of deaths we've had is 1,191 from COVID. Yes, very little, some may say, but for us, this is a big number. We are a population of 18 million plus, so this 1,191 deaths is a great deal to us. At the same time, I must be quick to mention that we've had, to date, since the COVID started, we've had about 87,318 confirmed positive cases. But of course, of these, 83,895 people have recovered from it. Yeah. But then, of course, we also should keep it in mind that these are cases that have been recorded in the hospital books and everything. Yeah. And of course, the great news just yesterday, or was it today? Just yesterday, we got an announcement that the COVID vaccine is finally coming, has finally come to our country, and pretty soon it's going to be rolled out. But then, of course, this is going to be restricted to a certain age, which is like 18 and above. So I think this is pretty much what's happening in most countries out there. Yeah, so this is what's going on. But then, of course, it has affected everything we do. Okay, as I speak right now, most of these people you see on the panel, especially my students, we are having classes online. We are unable to meet physically just because of the same. And of course, when the first wave hit back in 2019, our country didn't quite feel it, but we only started feeling its impact now, especially as regards deaths and everything. So the second wave has really hit home pretty bad, because now we are actually able to kind of put names to the deaths, and it hasn't been quite an easy road for us. Otherwise, socializing, the way, African society is generally about being together, pretty much all the time. Even at the most awkward times, trust me, we are always together. So to tell us we can no longer meet and be a team or have functions and celebrate is pretty difficult for us. Otherwise, this is what we are riding on. It has not been so easy for us back here. So maybe to get us started, I should like to share exactly what the media's role has been during this pandemic. So the media has been there to educate, and indeed the media has been there to inform. The media has been there to create awareness about the COVID through different educational programs, different stories, and indeed they've been there to try by all means to demystify certain myths and certain beliefs about the COVID, and to indeed break through all the misinformation regarding COVID. So we've had it back here where people have believed different things about the COVID, and trust me, some people have actually lost their lives because of the misinformation that they've gotten through, especially social media, and indeed through their general interactions in the community. So the media has been trying by all means to play the role of educating, trying to create awareness, sensitizing, and all that. And also, one of the crucial roles that the media has played is that of acting as a watchdog. And as you all well know, Africa, and in particular my country, I'm just going to be honest, the levels of corruption are pretty high. Most times donor funds are misused. So more especially in a sector like the health sector, that matters. So most times you find donor aid money, or indeed money meant for fighting the COVID, has been misused and all that. So we've seen a number of stories popping up in the news, investigative pieces, people who are involved in these corruption cases being exposed and all that. So the media in my country is watching. And of course, we have also been trying by all means to play the role of entertainment. Yeah, and of course, I speak more so for my my students here, who pretty much run the media platforms that we have in the university by themselves. So we have the Unza radio, where they play music, and indeed they get to present different entertaining programs besides the information and the updates about the COVID. Also, taking in mind that the COVID stories obviously have been prioritized because we feel these matter a great deal. Oh, we have Ellen, another journalist who has hopped in. Hello, Helen.
Thank you so much. Hello, and to all those participants out there.
Thank you so much for joining us. So this is what has been happening. So through the moderator, perhaps I should now be able to invite, let's perhaps have Bibiana first, and then Ellen to share some of experiences as regards how the pandemic has affected their reporting, what has been going on in the newsrooms and all that.
Okay, good afternoon, Roberta. Good afternoon to everyone gathered here on this platform this afternoon. I know it's in the morning elsewhere, so good morning to those who are probably listening into this. The pandemic itself has had quite a toll on our work as journalists. I'll specifically restrict myself to the organization that I represent, because that's where my first experience is coming from. It has been quite a moment, because we've had to sort of flow with the current depending on the situation. Last year, I remember when restrictions were put in place, public gatherings couldn't take place. And so meeting with our news sources became a big challenge. We had to literally transform and sort of fit in the new world of work culture, what I'm calling it, where you learn to exist beyond being able to meet your source one-on-one. And so resorting to online means of contacting news sources and getting them to trust that this particular individual that they're speaking to is the right person to get the information that you're looking for. So it required a lot of trust. And there were stories that you couldn't follow through because your source was just not reachable. They were maybe in a COVID facility for some reason, and maybe they'll just send you a text, I'm not able to speak to you. I will give you somebody else to talk because right now I'm unwell. And so it became a real challenge. And also the ability of rolling as we would, as media, we felt as an organization, our journalists couldn't be exposed as much because the aspect of them being ensured in case of the situation were not there. So it really took a toll. It demanded on us changing with the change that we met and resorting to other means such as holding our meetings via Zoom for our diary sessions in the morning and planning our work and keeping each other accountable of how our work was going, on a daily basis, and ensuring that we kept tabs on each other and helped each other to stay afloat, because obviously some may be stronger than others. And so to encourage them to know that they could still function and not to allow COVID to choke their ability to be productive, to be creative, to generate the stories that they needed, took a toll. And we did have some who were sort of getting lost through the cracks and wondering, am I doing anything? Am I not doing anything? And particularly working with students that walked into our station, it was really tough. The first group that we had to, get them in for a week, and then we had a situation within the office and send them home. 2-3 weeks are working from home just to give that 14-day window, and then bringing them back on board and keeping an eye, making sure that the students and the reporters in-house were safe. It was quite a challenge, but I want to just put it on record that COVID has created for us an opportunity to know the way of tomorrow's newsroom, to be able to exist and function regardless of the many barriers that we find. And COVID has not crippled our ability to function. We've had to get around, and I'm glad to say that we've been able to stay afloat and function.
Awesome. Perhaps now we can hear from Ellen. Ellen?
Well, thank you so much. Perhaps maybe I must have joined in a little bit late because of the network issues, so I might as well introduce myself. My name's Ellen Hambuba. I work for Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation. That's the national TV channel. And we are a broadcast station which produces news content for both radio and television. I must say that this COVID-19 pandemic has been a challenge for the corporation in the sense that we were almost crippled. When it comes to the number of people that were deployed to work, the workforce was not business as usual. We had to downsize the number of reporters. Generally, the whole institution had to downsize. We were given days in which to work, and the aspect of downsizing really had a toll on news content in terms of production. You know, on average, we have like 10 people that work, 10 reporters that work in a day. But because of this COVID, we were downsized to like 3 to 5 people working. That's the maximum. During the week, you know, a broadcast station runs even during holidays, Saturdays and Sundays. On Saturdays and Sundays, it was even worse. We would have maybe 2 reporters. And those reporters who are working, some of them were interns. And for a person on the subs desk, it was quite a challenge because even the content was affected, because those who were like senior reporters that were supposed to be going out in the field to gather news, it was not business as usual because some of them were in quarantine. Because apparently, you know, as frontline workers, we were affected. And I must tell you that I was also a victim. I actually contracted the COVID and I put through. And as I speak, I'm speaking from experience on how the system operated and how we've been running the institution with the COVID, the toll that COVID has come with it. For a newsroom, the day-to-day activities was not the usual business. You know, you find that when the stories come,
I said, if you have anything to tell me. No, I mean, this thing. I didn't hear that then.
Yeah, so we thought you...
Hello.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
no,
I think I'm getting.
Hello. Hello. I'm sorry. If we could mute our mics if we're not speaking right now. Go on, Ellen.
Well, thank you so much. So in terms of news production, in the newsroom, you find that the reporters that were dispatched to go and get copy, you would find that the sources were not really readily available to give out news. We had to resort to this new media where you use Zoom and like them face-to-face kind of interviews. Some sources would even reject even just the Zoom kind of news interviews. So would make phone calls, you'd get press statements. But you know, as a broadcast station, we normally rely on content. So without those sources, it wasn't very, very easy. It also affected our revenue base. Our marketing department, the revenues had gone down in the sense that we as an institution have people that we've recruited as part-time, those that are on contract. We had to downsize. Or, you know, the number of people that were put on contract had to be downsized because the revenue base was not enough to sustain those people that were recruited on part-time or those that were interns. In terms of, you know, just adapting and accepting that this is the situation now was not easy. You know, where you are told to wear face masks, observe the 5 golden rules, it was quite a challenge, you know. And but all in all, we did adapt. It's a situation, it's a day-to-day, and we're living to accept the situation that this is what is on the ground now, and we have to live with it. The other aspects, the challenges that we may have faced is even the terms of news production. Because of downsizing, you find that we would work long hours because we can't have the whole team work at the same time. So those that are tasked to work on a particular day or a particular week would have to multitask. So those are some of the challenges we encountered as a national broadcaster. And also for our local language, we also run local language TV and radio. So our local language team suffered greatly because of this pandemic. We have instances where our team go out to look for content in outlining areas for production in terms of the 7 local languages. But the situation was that because of the restricted movements, even the content that ran on the TV and radio channels was kind of reduced. We ended up repeating most of the programs that were run some time back. So it's been a challenge. It's only now and after that the numbers or the statistics for COVID have come down is when our colleagues from the local language are able to even go out there and go in the field and bring content for broadcasts. But otherwise, it hasn't been an easy ride. But otherwise, we are coping. We're getting there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I don't know who wants to chip in first to share their experiences.
Go first.
Hello?
Hello, can you get me? Hello, can you get me?
Yes.
I can go first.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, in case,
go ahead.
For those that do not know me, my name is Yamiko. Banda. I'm a student at the University of Zambia, and I'm also interning at the Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation. Well, my experience there has been good, I must say, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's been rather difficult to carry out certain activities in terms of reporting and just basically working the news. For example, when I got there in the first week, everything was quite normal, but then that's when the COVID-19 cases escalated. So at that time, like Ellen mentioned, we had to start working in shifts. So I was working for 3 days, every after 3 days. And by then, the first day would have, like she mentioned, about 10 reporters, but then we were reduced to about 4, 3, if at most 5. And then because of that, it brought about other challenges as well, because maybe there might be times when you have scheduled an appointment with a source and you are off on that day, meaning you are not necessarily supposed to be in the newsroom. So then you kind of have to work with your own resources, and these resources such as, phones, laptops, and whatever. And might find that somebody may not have a laptop or a phone or maybe the internet. We've had internet problems lately in our country, unfortunately. So it would be rather difficult, and bundles have been quite expensive, and not just that, because of we have few people working. You would find, one person is multitasking and they have to be at one event, and maybe there's a presidential event that has to be prioritized, and this person would have to leave what they are doing to go and attend to the president because that's his priority. And it will be a situation where, well, basically it's rude, if you know what I mean. Like you leave somebody that is speaking to go and attend to somebody because you do not have enough people that can, we can spread out across all these events. And also the issue of, not having power at residential areas. We've had a lot of load shedding experiences, but now that, well, our rain pattern lately has been quite good, so maybe that is a problem. Has been solved for now, but you find that your laptop or your gadget isn't that good, and the battery easily drains, then you're supposed to work. You're supposed to send this story, and because it's broadcast, it has this time thing. Like you always have to send it on time for it to air. And now you are under pressure. Because there's no power and your gadget is not that good. So all those things. Then other than that, when it came to
Yamiko, sorry, Yamiko,
yes.
Perhaps you want to explain what load shedding is?
Oh yeah. So this is when we have a lot of power cuts. Yes, I think that's the best way I can explain it. Power cuts. Power would be gone, say, at 6 a.m. Then maybe it would be coming back, around 6 p.m. So the whole day you might not have, electricity, and our gadgets have to be charged and whatnot, and you've been told to write a story, or you have an important story that has to be aired, but because you do not have electricity, you do not have power to charge your gadgets, to power your gadgets, you're unable to do so. And again, you can't go to the office because, well, you're not supposed to be there because of COVID, So that became a challenge. Then in terms of scheduled events that we had to attend, it also became a little bit tricky because we were told to go to these events, because they called for us. So then, in that case, we couldn't really go out and do stories from our own, brain, like our own, initiated stories for just our own safety. Going into the community, you do not know where you, because normally within for time for us, they have okay, so we see here and here and here and there, and we have sanitized but the unscheduled event would be like you're doing a community story and there's COVID out there, so you are at risk, and the people you're going to meet there are at risk as well. And not just that, the whole COVID thing on scheduled events also, I would like to say it kind of reduced reporters' creativity to come up with their own ideas on what they would like to do. So in the long run, you find that you have all these scheduled events every day. You tend to lose, because now you're not really thinking about what you have to do. You tend to lose that creativity on what you may want to do. You know what I mean? Then from there, I'd like to say it kind of promoted a certain level of laziness in reporters, especially with the whole not attending work after some time. You tend to relax. Maybe you could be listening to the news here and there, but because you haven't really been able to practice and, exercise your mind in coming up with a brilliant news idea, you might have difficulties when that time comes for you to actually do so, because all along you've had, these scheduled events already planned for you to do for the day. Yeah. And that's it. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you, Yamiko. Perhaps we could hear from Petronella.
Yes, madam. So my name's Petronella Mulenga Muyoya, and I'm a student at the University of Zambia. So my challenges, or rather as a group, because we encountered these challenges as a unit, not just as individuals, working for a radio station, which is pretty much run by students alone, was a really tricky way of running during the pandemic, because as a radio station that is run by students, usually even before the pandemic would have issues of not being able to reach sources, especially those in government offices. So now with the coming of the pandemic, we had situations where most entities were cutting down on the number of staff they have, which even posed a greater problem, because initially we had problems reaching these sources, and now the number was reduced to the actual number that's there. It was reduced. So we had challenges being able to get our stories done, because we had very few sources to talk to. And I think another problem that we faced was the quality of content that we had. The fact that we had very few sources to choose from, even the variety was different. So as journalists, we know it's always important to get more than one side of the story and always get a balanced story when you're writing it. So one of the problems we faced was the actual balancing of the story, because you'd find we have maybe on the main news we have 5 stories, and you'd have maybe 3 sources, similar sources in 3 different stories. So which doesn't promote much credibility, because you're having different sources speak in different expertise, but obviously they have a little knowledge about it, which is why we considered them as sources. But it was due to the fact that we had limited number of people to choose from. And also, I think another problem that we encountered as sports journalists was the fact that most sporting activities were put on hold due to the pandemic. So even as reporting, as for example, as a sports journalist, it was hard to have a variety of news, because we didn't have much sporting activities happening. So what are you going to report on? Training centers are closed, no games, no international games, no friendlies, because all these sporting activities require contact. So which is why they were sort of like banned for a couple of months until they assessed how the COVID pandemic was evolving in the country. So as a journalist, as a sports journalist, this was also a hindrance, because each journalist is always passionate about a particular beat or topic, And for me, it was sports journalism, and which was put on hold because of the pandemic. And also another thing is the quality of content that we got. So we got this content from pretty much similar sources. So now the duty that we had was to really scrutinize the data that they were giving us, because we were well aware that these people are not, experts in these fields, but they have, a little bit of knowledge about it. So even when they give you this, information, you need the stories to run, because at the end of the day, people are still going to tune in at 6 p.m. at 8 p.m. to listen to the news, so they expect the news. So we tried by all means to get balanced stories, but it wasn't as easy as it would have been if the pandemic was not as vicious as it's coming up. So as I think as journalists, we had to find a way of working with the pandemic. We also had a problem where we couldn't even, as Unza Radio, we couldn't have the recreational shows that we had. We couldn't have guests over because we're cutting on the number of people that would come to the studio. So that was also a compromise on the content that the content and the programming itself. So the pandemic has been, rough on the journalism industry, but I think at this particular point, I would like to say that we are coming to a point where we've been able to, realize what we can do and what we cannot do. So yeah, for me, I think, that's all. Those are most of the challenges that we faced.
Okay, great. So I'm sure most of these things that we, my students and indeed our other guests are talking about, all kind of just seem so depressing. But this is pretty much the situation on the ground. But things are actually getting better. Perhaps something that we could also talk about is the issue of the embracing of technology that Petronella has hinted on. Perhaps there's someone who can tell us about that one. Embracing of new. Yes, go on.
Yes, so my name is Tapela Lungu. I'm a recent graduate of Media and Communication Studies. So I think the issues to do with technology infrastructure in our country has really been quite a struggle for a long period of time. And I think it really became noticeable during the time the pandemic had really come on board. People are not ready to adjust to this new infrastructure, to the Zoom meetings, to all these virtual meetings that you had to attend to. And, even with diary meetings or diary sessions, there was this shift now from, working from the newsroom, and you're now presenting your news ideas in your bedroom or at the comfort of your living room. So it was quite a struggle looking at the fact that, when it comes to mobile broadband in our country, it is not quite as advanced as with other countries. We have got poor internet services with these network providers. Sometimes even just funds to support what you do, equipment that supports what you really do was really quite a troublesome moment. So people started adjusting, and in the beginning, a lot of people didn't know how to use some of these applications. You discover that somebody doesn't know how to mute their mic, even just their video, and you would have all these interruptions, bad feedback. So it was really, really quite a difficult situation. We've been trying to improve. Of course, there's this introduction of, the 4G, 4.5 network. Maybe at most in the future would have 5G network, but then you still look at the kind of infrastructure that we are ready to put up as a country. Are we ready for such kind of innovations and technology? So it might take some time, but people are adjusting, and people are still adjusting. Some are still in the learning process, but then we still have a long way to go in order for us to embrace such kind of infrastructure. You're looking at the gadgets such as our mobile devices, our laptops, our recorders. How do you integrate this so that you make your work more efficient and effective? So like I mentioned earlier, it's going to take some time. And then I think for me, what really was quite a huge challenge was the fact that there was a difficult transition between our professional and private life. You know, you had to shift. Sometimes you are requested to present your news ideas or to do your stories while you're at home. It's not all the time you are requested to be in the newsroom because of all those restrictions and guidelines. So I think it was really a frustrating and stressful moment, you know, whereby you're just back home. It was really tiresome. I think a lot of people would agree with me that it was really quite stressful. You know, it's like you're trying to bring together two different versions of yourself, the professional self and the private self, into one environment, which was really not quite easy. I mean, you're talking about, you know, an environment which makes you really comfortable, where you're away from work, but then you have to bring in the other side of your life into that same environment. Imagine you are conducting an interview on the mobile device. You're talking to your source, and then you hear maybe your young brother break a glass in the kitchen, or maybe you hear your neighbor who you don't talk to, maybe is cutting their grass using their lawnmower, and you can't tell them to keep quiet because you have an interview on the phone. And all these are necessary obstructions. But then, like I continue to say, it was a difficult transition, but then people had to adjust. The environment, even around your home, had to understand that this was a different shift, and it became a new normal. And then maybe also the fact of prioritizing stories when it comes to the news. I think the reason why COVID-related news items were really prioritized is because people were really fearful. Most were ignorant about the fact that COVID was real. Some people would even go up to saying maybe it's just a white thing or it's a Western European thing, until when it came in the country and they started seeing all those numbers trickle in. I think when they started seeing the cases rise up, the deaths, you know, the donations, the isolation centers being established, I think everyone started getting glued to the news. I think this was also a time whereby there was a lot of people watching television or even listening to the radio, because people wanted some breakthrough kind of information, like is the economy going to start thriving again? When are we getting back to our jobs? Is there anything good about this pandemic? And you know, you had to prioritize such kind of information, because even with regards to the donations, people wanted to know the numbers, how much has been donated so far, where is the money, where is it going to? So also, it was also important for us journalists to really be careful with our fact-checking skills, because you didn't want to bring out information that was forceful or false, because you are aware that a lot of people are watching and they're listening to what you are producing as a journalist, and you wouldn't want to make a mistake. So it still is quite a difficult time, but like everyone has said, it's something that we are beginning to adjust, and has become a reality that it's here to stay. And the only thing that we have to do is to adjust and accept and embrace whatever changes that have come along. So I think that's what I can say on my part.
Thanks, Tapela. Unfortunately, one of our presenters has got to leave, Miss Ellen Habuba. Unfortunately, is on duty right now, even as she's here, so she wants to go and read the news. She's one of our country's best news anchors, actually. Ellen, do you want to quickly say bye-bye?
Yes, I just want to say thank you so much for according me an opportunity to participate, to be amongst the panelists. And all I wanted to share before I leave is that as journalists, I think what we need to do, that even as statistics go down here in our country, Zambia, we need to forge ahead and continue sensitizing people about the dangers of COVID-19. Speaking from experience, I think I have a lot of stories to tell on how terrible the disease is. And I've walked around the streets of Lusaka, gone to shopping malls, the markets, and you know, the picture which is on the table right now is that there's no COVID, and it's our role as media personalities to sensitize people and tell them that this thing is real, and that they have to follow the 5 golden rules of masking up, physical distance, you know, wearing masks, and all those rules that the Ministry of Health has prescribed, because the situation on the ground is really scary. You know, you only know COVID exists if you are a victim or if you have a close relative that is sick. So for me, I would really love to encourage media personnel that to continue sensitizing people and educating the people. You know, it should go beyond a pen, paper, a recorder. It should be something that should be done even off work, you know, to highlight and sensitize people that COVID is real. You know. I think that's what I would love to share. And I'm very happy that our institution, ZNBC, is very keen at highlighting and bringing out issues that sensitize people about the dangers of COVID. We've taken up, we have programs that are run in local languages. Even just any ordinary programs, the discussion programs cannot escape without talking about COVID, because this is a pandemic. And if we shut down the information from the general citizenry, it means that we're killing people. So the more we talk about it, the more we're going to save so many lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ellen. So if you need to read more about Ellen and indeed her experiences with COVID and indeed other experiences in her journalism, you should be able to find her on Facebook. She's Ellen Abumba. Yeah, so you should be able to find her on there. Thank you so much for being here, Ellen.
Thank you so much. I beg to leave now.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Okay.
So I'm sure there's somebody else who's itching to say something. Please just chip right in. Mutinta, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Ms. Muchangwe. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, go ahead, Mutinta.
Okay, great. So my name is Mutinta Nanchengwa. I'm a fourth-year student, and I'm a writer with our digital newspaper. It's called the Lusaka Star. And something that we came across, myself as a student journalist and just as a general citizen, is the crisis of news media when it comes to news in general about the coronavirus pandemic. You will understand with digital platforms such as Facebook and Twitter and, of course, WhatsApp, there's a lot of misinformation. I don't like the term fake news. News can never be fake, but there's a lot of misinformation that's going around about this pandemic, about what it means, about the effects of the pandemic, and so on and so forth. So you'll find that a lot of people are very unsure of what to trust and what to believe when they listen to the news, and that's a challenge that we realistically had as journalists and as members of the general public. So you'll see that there's a lot of misinformation that was floating around, especially at the advent of COVID in Zambia. You'll hear people saying things like, oh no, we have melanin in our skin, so we're unable to get coronavirus. Or you'll hear people say that COVID doesn't affect the young population, which is untrue. There's a lot of things that people were saying, things such as you'd only need to do maybe ABCD, which is actually untrue. So the media, especially people who are writing, had a very momentous task of ensuring that the information that we put out is helping people to understand exactly what this disease and what this pandemic is about and how it's going to actually affect us and what we need to do to ensure that we stay safe. Some people are of the idea that you don't need sanitizer, you only maybe need to wash your hands, or you don't really need to wear a mask unless you're in certain specific places, which just isn't true. We do need to follow the 5 golden rules, as Ellen had mentioned earlier. And then also, as we are receiving the vaccine, I think, Ms. Muchangwe, you mentioned that we're going to have the vaccine very soon. There's still a lot of misinformation concerning that. People are still believing that the vaccine may make you sick, or that the vaccine hasn't been through the correct vetting processes that it needs to go through for us to actually get the vaccine. And there's also people who have founded concerns. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's unfounded, but people have concerns that perhaps the vaccine is not necessarily safe because it was developed in what is a relatively shorter time. And there's the more crazy concerns that the vaccine is out to kill the African population, and that the vaccine is, if I can be a little bit politically incorrect, but the white man's tool, and all these crazy things that are going on in the media. So the news personnel have had quite the burden in ensuring that not only are people aware, but are aware of the correct facts. And this has been a bit of a challenge because people are more likely to come to believe information that comes from an easily accessible source. So if your mother is telling you not to take the vaccine, you're more likely to believe your mother, because what if the media is part of this big crazy agenda? There's been so many conspiracy theories, and that's been something that we've had to fight against. We need to let people know that we're not trying to kill them, but what's going on in the media is in fact the truth, and that has been one of the bigger challenges. And on top of that, people in the media have had a bigger challenge because, as my colleagues have mentioned before, we have less tools. So, for example, we don't have, especially as student journalists, we don't have the recorders, we don't have laptops, we may be experiencing power outages, we may have internet challenges, and that makes it very difficult for us to deliver the news in a timely manner, because these things are very time sensitive. If someone with a very large platform has said, don't take the vaccine, many people are likely to follow that, as opposed to if a person with a smaller platform were to say that. So us news personnel need to make sure that the information is given in a timely manner, but we've had the challenge of not necessarily having the correct devices, especially us as students. We are still struggling with load shedding, sometimes the internet, sometimes just getting the correct information. We don't have the correct information on time. We may not have cameras, and people like to see a face for them to believe the story, and that's been some of the bigger challenges that we faced. So we have had quite an interesting experience trying to tackle fake news, trying to make sure that the news that people are receiving is actually accurate and is news that people are going to be more accepting of, and especially going against opinion leaders who tend to have much larger voices in our country. You'll find socialites, social media people are able to say things and people will buy into their message. And that's been some of the biggest challenges we've had in the crisis of news and fake news.
Awesome. So the plan was to have a Q&A. We were supposed to have a Q&A at the end of this whole thing, about 20 minutes Q&A, and we were hoping that perhaps people could type questions in the chat and we could answer them. Otherwise, we Africans like to talk, so sometimes you just have to stop us. So perhaps we could hear from Fatima. Quickly, please. Fatima, do you want to say something? Fatima, we can't hear you. Something is happening to Fatima's mic, I think. Perhaps we could hear from Victor Kalalanda for now. Victor, are you there?
Yes, madam. Yes, can you
please
get
go
me?
ahead. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much.
At least I can hear you.
All right, thank you so much. So my name is Victor Kalalanda, and I work for the Zambia Daily Mail as a feature writer. And so to me, first of all, I'd like to talk about what I noticed happening on the newspaper. When the pandemic spread through the country, we had a lot of, obituaries. I think for the first time, I've never seen this much obituaries on a features desk. So that tells you something about, the people that were dying. We had a lot of important people in this country dying, professors in universities, politicians, celebrities, and every week we have to do a lot of obituaries. Sometimes we can't just keep with the pace because we have a very small staff. We have like 6 core writers on the newspaper, so that tends to be a problem. And yesterday, when I was covering a certain event here in Lusaka, in town, I actually met the couple the first couple that contracted COVID. In fact, yeah, the first person who contracted COVID-19. It's a Greek couple here in Lusaka. Yes, and now I would like to talk about revenue reduction. How revenue has been affected, by the pandemic. And just recently, the two major newspapers in this country, the Zambia Daily Mail and the Times of Zambia, have been merged, by the government because of decline in revenues. The other newspaper, the Times of Zambia, has been on life support for some time. It's been a sinking ship, and the government has stepped in, to resuscitate it. Otherwise, it's going to die. But that tells you something about the impact of this pandemic. First of all, because of limited physical contact, people can't go to the streets and buy the newspaper. And so what happens? Also, people that want advertising space can't visit the newspaper because of social distancing. And what that has given rise to is reduced advertising. So now there's a growing preference, therefore, for data-driven, advertising. So there's a growing interest in digital marketing, and we have seen a proliferation of social media channels. So we have seen a lot of social media influencers coming on the scene. We have seen a lot of YouTube channels opening up. And now what has happened is that the traditional media, the mainstream newspapers and the TV stations are not getting that much revenue from advertising. And my own newspaper stopped recruiting, by the way. They stopped recruiting, citing, this very reason. So they stopped recruiting people anymore. We have got categories of employment, so people are no longer being put on contract, and they would rather go for attrition, And you know what that means. So for someone, therefore, to get a job as a journalist in this country, they have to be now twice as good, as opposed to, than, before the pandemic. They have to be twice as good. And then, because we have seen the growth in data-driven, advertising, to me, it therefore appears that the future of the media will be an interdependence between content creation and digital marketing, or should I say data-driven advertising, because journalism will become basically a form of content creation. We will no longer practice it, traditionally. That's how I think, because this seems to be the trend that the profession is taking in this country. So I do see a silver lining in that. Therefore, the focus for media students in universities in this country should be to adopt and adapt to new technologies. So they must be able to create content as bloggers, so that adverts can pop up there and they can make some money. They should also be able to open YouTube channels and create content there. If they are into fashion, they can attract a certain audience, and this is what has been happening. So we have a lot of people who are into travel who have opened YouTube channels, and they make respectable incomes from that. So to me, there is this growing relationship between content creation and digital marketing as the space for mainstream media begins to shrink as a result of reduced revenues. And
Awesome.
then
Thank you so much, Victor. I'm afraid I wish we had so much time. I know you've got loads to say, and I'm sure we can always find some time to continue the chat that Victor has started with TSU. I think that would be an interesting chat to continue. So we've got barely 5 minutes to go. So I don't know if there are any questions. Yes, silly question to ask right now because we've pretty much run out of time. But I don't know if there's any questions from the people attending right now, or should we continue talking?
In the chat box, I think it's coming from Chris. Sorry, he says, what is your assessment of the effectiveness of the media I don't know if this was written right, but what is your assessment of the effectiveness media, the COVID pandemic in Zambia or the rest of Africa?
What is your assessment of the effectiveness of effectiveness of media? The effectiveness of the media during this whole COVID period in Zambia? I'm not quite sure I get the question. What is your assessment of the effectiveness? I don't know. I'm afraid your question.
I think he means how effective has the media been during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes.
What is your assessment of the effectiveness of media coverage of the COVID pandemic in Zambia or the rest of Africa? Well, generally, we, of course, are speaking to Zambia right now. And what I do see happening is in our country, we could say the coverage has been effective just because COVID stories have been prioritized, if anything. However, when we look across the globe, there's a lot of press freedom threats, if anything, as regards reporting on COVID. Just in one of the Eastern African countries, Tanzania, the president was not so comfortable about releasing any updates regarding the COVID. So the numbers for some countries also mattered. So it seemed the media ended up turning to self-censorship just because they were afraid of being victimized or indeed taken to answer to the so-called authorities. Otherwise, the general coverage of the COVID has been good. But to be honest, most of the sources that I want to believe most of our countrymen believe in during this period have been international sources. Talk about CNN, talk about Sky News, the BBC. However, what we saw happening also was people getting a little confused because even those international media did not seem so confident about what they were reporting. I guess also based on the information they were getting from scientists, the World Health Organization, and all those places. So there was a bit of a time of confusion as regards who to trust and whatnot. Otherwise, social media, trust me, social media has taken the show. It did take the show on the first time COVID hit. But we see a reduction in there, and we see most people going back to traditional media because whether they like it or not, traditional media, the newspapers, and indeed the state-owned media are the most reliable as regards information. You know, there's not so much misinformation there.
Good morning or good afternoon or good evening. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
It is so wonderful to see you, Professor Muchangwe. We miss you. We miss you. We miss you. On behalf of the School of Communication, thank you so very much for assembling this wonderful panel and sharing with us about what's going on in Gambia. I know you and I have exchanged messages over social media about that, but it's so wonderful to hear you in real time. I want to say thank you. One of the things that I did want to highlight is the comment that was made. I know we have to go by one of your panelists regarding having to be twice as good and better. And I just think that that's such a one of the things that continues to connect us throughout the diaspora and requirement still to have to be twice as good even to do the work within our own communities. So thank you so very much. We appreciate you all, and we will have you back soon to continue this conversation. It doesn't have to be during Comm Week. So continue to keep everybody ready, Professor Muchangwe, and get your bags packed because we need you to come on back over here.
Yeah. So feel free to invite us to your classrooms. Feel free to do that. We are geared to come through and, speak to your students and whatever. Yeah.
Thank you. Be blessed, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Comm Week.